Let's bring it up there.
John,
Right,
there goes
look at
John.
that.
Welcome, John. I think we're the last person to the room. We watched you take your seat. John, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Space for John.
John, we're just noting that it's a full meeting today, and so I hope that fits with your commitments. But we'll see how we go. Welcome, folks, to our meeting. It's 7th of August, I hope it is, because that's where I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
And it's our August meeting of the quarterly meeting of the Finance and Assurance Committee with a full agenda. I just wonder if we could deal with the formalities we've got in front of it. Do we have any apologies for a full muster? People are able to stay, basically. Okay, there's no apologies, that's fine. I haven't had any information around leave of absence. We have quite a number of items in here. Are there any items that you may wish to raise your interest? Yes, Matt.
Bruce, I'm listed as a contributor for item C 8.1.
Yep.
Yep. That was listed in that report, so I just wanted to highlight.
Are you of the view that you can or can't stay in the meeting?
I mean, based on an email sent to councillors last week, I have some predetermined ideas. However, yeah, would still like to be.
Predetermined or open or an open mind?
Open mind.
You need to be comfortable that you've got an open mind. I'm comfortable.
I've got a very open mind. Yeah.
So look, I think it's thank you for noting that. Matt, I think we can vote please for the minutes that Matt is an interest. Nothing wrong with holding views. I haven't been informed of any extraordinary or urgent business. I just, and probably even from the chair, should apologise. Anne is working on a reworked set of resolutions, which I actually don't change the planned resolutions you've read in the LTP section. They possibly just make it clearer. Can we go to the minutes, please, of our meeting of the 5th of June. I'll move from the chair. We take them as a true and correct record. Second, please. Thank you, Rob. Matters of accuracy, correctness. Any particular comments on that? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. I hear aye. Those against? It's carried. Good. I don't think there's anything particularly in that coming up that we've dealt with, so I think we keep going on. I haven't been informed of public participation at this stage, Rachel, so we can move that over, which gets us then to the first item, which is 7.1, which is our work plan. And somebody.
Thank you, Mr Chair, Councillors. So it's with my pleasure that I just present the work plan for the year ended 30th of June 2025. Of course, that was based on the work program that was discussed and agreed at our 5th of June 2024 meeting. And the changes to that, we've just got an additional 2 reports, and a contract advisory group report that's been put out to our public excluded agenda. And also we're just adding a further report for the September meeting, which is that self-assessment by the chair at the June 2024 meeting.
Good. I have tend to, as the chair, always look through not just this meeting, but actually what's in front of us, and it just reflects, as I say, we've got a particular focus today, but reckon the September meeting coming up is a normal quarterly meeting. October, of course, we've got a focus around the adoption of the annual report. Always is going to come right on the heels of dealing with this LTP. That's fine. We have perhaps a suggestion for an additional meeting, but we will deal with that in the resolutions that come through under the LTP. I'd like to move from the chair that we received. We note the amendments. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. The motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against is carried. Thank you. Right, now we move to 7.2, which is the draft unaudited long-term plan. You spoke a few things partly about this, but I'd just like to put the chair's view about what we're trying to achieve today. I don't know what number of LTPs I've looked at this year. For obvious reasons, it's a good number. And I think it's fair to say, and I think we should all acknowledge, the position that not only Southern District but defines itself in, which is that actually this has probably been the most arduous LTP to try and get through. Whether you want to talk about government reform, whether you want to talk about inflation, whether you want to talk about the challenges of the services we'd like to give to our community, I think there's a fairly strong argument that it's been the toughest. You know, the problem actually also is it might also be the least satisfied at this stage. And that's always a problem. So where are we at? We're getting near the end of, how long's the journey been? About 18 months, Nicole?
At least.
At least. At least. And this is a difficult proposition that we are building on decisions that are made and we have to bank. And of course, most recently, you importantly heard from your community and you had your so-called deliberations, where you essentially settled on the LTP you're going to adopt this year. That is actually quite a critical date from a decision-making perspective. So what are we doing today? Well, it's the Finance and Assurance Committee's chance to check on the on the LTP, but I can say the consultation document only. The LTP leading up to its adoption. So what is it that's in front of us? It's actually, have we got it right in the final form? And if I can be up front, Julie, you've given us a couple of, well, actually more than a couple, some really good suggestions perhaps around tone and tenor. And actually the other thing that we have to deal with is going to be between now and the 26th, the final audit and the receipt of the audit opinion. And I think it's going to be fair to say there's a couple of matters here that we need to talk to you about today as far as that's concerned. I'd like to make a statement though as your independent chair, and I risk cutting across democracy. This is not the point to relitigate the decisions you made at deliberations. This is not the time to suddenly decide to take 10% off your rates increase. It could be, but it substantially heightens the risk for Southern District for 24-25. There are three things, if you're attempted to relitigate, that could be problematic. You will affect our rating for the year. Now, I know you might argue that would be beneficial, but actually there are processes we have to go through to separate this. We've already changed them to fit this delayed process. If you were to materially change the LTP at this point, you threaten our cash flow. The second thing is, if you materially change it, we'll have to go back to the community. So this is the point about the decisions being made. If you want to change this radically, either today or on the 26th, you are going to have to go back to the community. And I think the third thing is it will delay it even further, because the auditors, it's not that they won't have to start again, but they will have to do substantially more work. So I just want to reflect on that as we look at this today. Where are we at? We are going back to, as I said, the point, we're looking at this finalisation of the document. What gets this to the point that on the 26th of August, with an audit opinion, we can adopt the LTP. That's the critical thing, rather than anything else. So look, I say those comments as your chair, and I'm open to debate and pushback on that, but I want to reflect the process we're in. So what I'd like to do at this point, firstly, are there any comments on my comments? Because you've got a right to have a crack. Have a chat. We're fine? Yes, Don?
Thank you, Bruce. You're saying that this isn't the point to make material change. We'd have to go back to the community. Well, we've just been to the community. We gave, for example, the roading, 3 options. Why do we have to, if we decide to take another option, why do we have to go back to the community?
I think the critical point is that through your deliberations you have settled broadly, even specifically, on the options that you are following. There is a point at which consultation works okay, but if you want to significantly change, I suspect you're going to have to go back.
That doesn't make sense to me because we've gone to the community with 3 options.
Yeah, I think
And since we've come back from the community, received these submissions, we've settled on something. Now, if we just change the option that we settle on, I don't see the point. Why you would have to go back to the community.
Point out your options, but there are at least 2 other points I'm making here. This will delay the process, and there are the issues around trying to rate for this year, and there is the issue with the audit.
Those would seem to be outside of what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Don, no, it's not. It's actually directly relevant. What I'm saying to you is this heightens the risk of us going forward. Okay? I'm not saying you couldn't do it. There's a democratic right here, and I don't want to walk off democracy. But I think we need to reflect on the process you have been following, decisions that you have made, and you need to bank them. If there is radical change, either today or on the 26th, it makes it very difficult from a process for the council to go forward without substantial change and problems with the cash flow.
Well,
Any other comments folk would like to raise? Okay. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I guess based on what you're saying, that we just need to refocus in particular on looking at examples around things like strategic assets and how we report, using examples of, quarterly reporting, so that those processes are more robust and we have the confidence over that period to be able to make those decisions that you're talking about.
I think if I could rephrase it, Tom, quite right. There's a level of form and content to this. The direction has been broadly set by your meeting deliberations, and consequently, that's in essence my argument is we should accept that, because actually we've got to go through a process of dealing with a couple of word questions, which, as I said, without being too dramatic, we need to consider this morning, and enable you to settle on this LTP on the 26th of August. So I agree with you. I think what you're saying. Derek, you got a question?
Yeah, I just asked the question, if we don't adopt the long-term plan, what are the consequences? Because the people that elected me into this job are none too happy about the path or the outlook for the next 10 years. So if I'm to vote for the people that put me here, I wouldn't be, it's not a plan that I find that's palatable. So what are the consequences if we don't adopt this plan?
So let me just draw a distinction. Politically, where you want to stand in terms of the 26th of August, voting for or against the LTP is a decision you have to make personally. I can't, I'm not going to advise you. That's a political consideration which I need to keep away from, Derek. The issue was not adopting the long-term plan as you can't rate. It's as simple as that. Your long-term plan is also your annual plan, and the Rating Act requires your proposed rates be aligned with your adopted long-term plan, annual plan, or relevant planning documents. So if we don't have an adopted LTP, we can't rate. It's as stark as that.
So
the only dispensation is under the Rating Act there is an ability for the first instalment to be 25% of last year's rates. That's it, as far as I'm aware. And it does raise questions about whether you can follow through on your spend or your planned expenditure in the coming year. Council operating without an LTP, I think, is at high risk. You have to have an LTP in place, is really what it comes down to.
Even if you don't agree with it.
Well, there's a political discussion on the 26th about it. I mean, if there was to be a majority voting against it, that's a difficult position. It's one that would have to be addressed straight away. You can't operate as a council without an LTP in place. Yeah, Nicole.
Just a comment through your chair is 24-25 is important for rate setting. The long-term plan is a 10-year document. If the issue is around the direction in the future, that's when you review in your annual plans. You know, you have annual reviews each year to look at, is what we're planning in our LTP still right? Do we need to make some changes to that? So you still have discussion. So even though you're setting 10 years, year one matters for rate setting, but you get an opportunity to talk about the future again when you're reviewing your annual plan, budgets and things like that, and then when you review the next LTP. I just want to make that point, that you're not locking in 10 years worth of this is where we're heading. The plan tells you where it looks like we're heading, and you review that annually through an annual plan process.
No, it might be the case of death, but I suspect the sector as a whole will be having to review LTP more frequently than it would anticipate right at the moment, but that's for the future. Oh yeah, I think it would be important at the stage.
Yeah, I'll just following on from that, I guess, just as an idea, well, not an idea that I'm putting forward, but for clarity, at this stage, can the LTP be adjusted to become an annual plan and the LTP remain in its draft form with more work to be done, but the first year of the LTP as an annual plan? Is that an option?
Legally, I don't know. I don't know. We're past that point, I think. I think it's resolved, I think.
Yes.
In essence, whilst you might be adopting an LTP that's 10 years, you're really adopting definitely for certain year one in your heads. And you can have, if you are not comfortable about the later years, you start to have those conversations straight away, right? And then you make a plan going forward. But the pressure is on to adopt a plan for year one, or else we won't have any money to actually operate and do anything.
And I suspect, Matt, knowing some of my engagements have gone for the annual plan, it doesn't help a lot. Because all of a sudden you now have to go and adopt a 9-year plan by 30 June next year. And I'm not certain if you're feeling things are uncertain, or that you can't set your objectives now, you'll be any more certain in 3 or 4 months' time, which is when you'll have to, be doing all this work again. So I think to reflect on Nicole's wisdom, we're best, my advice is, we're best to review this, get to the point that we can adopt it on the 26th, hopefully with a majority, and recognise that that's why I said it's one of the toughest LTPs, possibly the least satisfying. We'll have to keep the whole plan under review, not just the year, but the whole plan, because it may well be we need to think about some form of rework of it at a, not in 3 years' time, possibly next year or even in 2 years' time. So I think we should keep that as a bit. I don't want to feel like this is sort of just now we're into a tick box or a process exercise, but it is a sense we're getting ourselves ready to be able to accept the audit opinion and adopt it and get on with business.
Just a further comment to Matt's suggestion, I think if we look at the painful process that we've gone through to get to this point as an LTP, I'd prefer to Nicole's point, work on it as an annual plan, but work on what you've talked about before, the long-term plan, and actually have that time to put into that strategic view to define how we go going forwards. And I think that gives us the opportunity to change on an annual plan basis and leading up to the next LTP to get that stronger, rather than trying to reinvent and go back through this whole painful process again to almost land in the same position.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, Paul.
Oh, just, I mean, none of us are happy with how it's looking for 10 years' time. But I think you could do a budget up for any business or farm or whatever, looking at 10 years, and be pretty horrified with the signs you're looking at that far out. But the time to address those is on a much shorter basis when you've actually got all the information. And we've got so much unknown and variable waters and all of these things that we've had to accommodate in this. But the reality at the time will be much different, and that's the time to be doing the belt tightening or whatever, depending on the circumstances. We're only really guessing a lot of this now.
Hopefully there's a bit more method.
Well, I mean, guessing's not a
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and totally absurd, because I think it actually reflects.
No, sorry, that was wrong.
Well, I think at this stage it would be good to keep us moving. So, Anne, if I could ask you to lead off with where you would like to take us, please, that would be valuable.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as the Chair's pointed out, this document is basically incorporating the resolutions of our deliberations meeting, which was in the attachments. So we're taking the position that we went out to consultation, we're incorporating those deliberations discussions, and then we're ending up with where we are here right now. Okay? So that's just to sort of give you that understanding. This document has had a really, really tight turnaround in terms of getting it out. So I really do have to say thank you very much to those councillors who have already sent us through some suggestions or some corrections that we need to make to spelling or to just the tone of the document. Those will be incorporated if anyone else has any. There's a resolution in here that allows for that to occur with the Chair and the Chief Executive's approval, so we can incorporate that post this meeting. Just in terms of, at this stage, there's probably two key issues that we're dealing with in terms of the auditors. Each of those is, well, one of those is NZTA and the other one is inflation. So if I go back a step and just think about FRS 42, which is prospective financial statements, the OAG are coming back to the auditors and they're saying the standard requires that an entity use the best information that could reasonably be expected to be available at the time prospective financial statements are prepared. Okay? So what they're saying to us now is that we have received two information that potentially should mean that we should be going back and re-looking at the accounts as we've so for NZTA, that is the two letters that we have received in June and August in terms of the $147 million program that we approached them for. And as you will see on our agenda, which is on page 38, that indicative funding has come back at this stage as less than what we had asked for. Now, this is no different than what we've received in the past. But what the OAG is effectively saying to us is because you've received that information and that's your best available information, then potentially your accounts should now reflect that information. Okay, and what we're saying is that yes, we understand that we've received that information and yes, it's fair and reasonable that we do reflect at least the NZTA funding portion of that, but we also have to consider that there are other elements that influence the amount of money that we will end up with. Those things that are influencing that is around the fact that often what will occur is we'll get the final letter, and in that final letter from NZTA we'll have received more funds. And if we don't have our local share, then potentially we can't undertake that program, unless of course we decide to do debt and repay it in the future. Now last time that was around $6.9 million. Okay. The second one that we had was that in the last long-term plan in years 2 and 3, NZTA came back and approached us and said, actually, there's some more funding available for you. Should you wish to have your local share, you can actually take that program on. We said at that stage, no, we didn't, because we'd adopted our program, so we didn't take that opportunity. The other thing that we have to remember with this LTP is that the government, as part of its 100-day plan, came out and said, hey, there's this regional fund that's available potentially that the council could apply to. We're currently processing an application in regards to that, principally around bridging. So there's other opportunities under which actually we could maybe move our program around and still deliver levels of service, but in a slightly different manner, or maybe slightly reduced, but not to the point where we can't pull it back. So what I heard at the deliberations meeting from council was that, and what I heard from you or from the ratepayers was that they wanted to keep our levels of service up. and you wanted them to retain the program as it currently was budgeted in there at 147, which is what this document proposes. The only thing that I am suggesting at this stage is that we re-look at the way we describe the funding. So right now it says it's 100% NZTA funded. Well, I shouldn't say 100%, 55% of the program. What I'm suggesting is we drop that back down to 55% of the program that they said indicatively they will fund. And with the difference, which is on $18.5 million, on that difference, the 55 million, we actually treat that as a grant from central government, and we put an assumption into our books to reflect that. And one of the assumptions that we've got in this resolution is also for you to acknowledge that actually, should we not get that funding, you are not prepared to do that program, and you are prepared to see a reduction in the levels of service. Okay? So it's just confirming that, but it's also confirming that if we do collect these rates, because I'm still saying rates is in there, if we do collect those rates and they are not used, that they will be separately kept and utilised for a future program in the future, whatever that program may be. So, and you'll have a decision to do that. So that's, and I guess what you've got to do today with this series of resolutions is either stick with that stance, or you could actually go and say, well, the OAG has given us this directive, and we're actually in a tight position that we could get a qualified opinion on this because it is substantive, and we're not prepared to have that qualified opinion. So therefore, we're going to reduce that program back to the way, to what they've indicated to us. So you do have some options in there to think about. All I've done in this plan as it currently stands is just follow the direction that you've given me to date on to that issue.
So if it's a good place
Yeah,
just to
I think
break
so. Yep.
for a moment. This is the first of two issues, I'm afraid. So I think I would firstly open for questions. Do you sorry, it's a terrible way to put it.
No, it's okay.
Are there questions of clarification about the position? This is being set out in the paper, and at the risk of re-explaining, if you go to page 38 and look at the top table, well, it's actually the continuation of the table on the previous page. And if I can re-paraphrase, please. 147 million is the program that we plan and you want to keep to. If you look at the right, the middle column, the program that is afforded by the indicative funding for the 2 years to date is $125 million. Okay, so to go to Anne's point about the OAG, they're saying 125 is the best estimates, and that's what you should include. If I understand it correctly, that automatically means a reduction in level of service. If you look at the prior page and the levels of service impact, you'll see that 52 kilometres less resurfaced, 3 kilometres less renewed, and it carries on. So what we are proposing, or rather what this draft in front of you has, is retention of the program at $147 million. It will include, with the adjustments, best estimates NZTA funding, 55% of $125 million. The balance obviously being the local share. The question is, what about the difference between 125 and 147? What I've heard from Anne is that we are going to assume, and this is the key point, I want to come back to it, that in some way we will get 55% of that $18 million. Whether that's NZTA, as they did last time, finding extra funds they gave us, or in some way. We will also rate for our 45% share of that $18 million. So the rates that go out this year will include that 45%. So that means we retain within this draft LTP, going to the auditors, a program of $147 million, which, as I understand it, fits with the deliberations that you've actually made. The risk for us is that we are making an assumption that 9.9, whatever the number finally comes out at, will come from some source other than ourselves, read NZTA or central government. That is an assumption which is probably, at this point, we have to acknowledge, because we've only got the two letters, highly uncertain. So I think we need to be prepared to disclose that in the LTP. We're making an assumption that we'll get this $9.9 million, but hello, here goes Anne's point. If we can't, recognise that this will affect our as an adjunct to that, we of course have got 45% of that $80 million that we're rated for. And this resolution that Anne has talked about is that actually we recognise that and we will ring fence that to go into a future rating program, so that the ratepayer still is treated equitably by keeping it there. The issue is this assumption. We can disclose it, we can show it's highly uncertain, we can agree that we're going to go all out, and I think you've already agreed that anyway, but all out to try and find ways in which encouraging others to give us money. But we don't know that we will get it, and there is a risk with that. The auditor has indicated, and I want to reflect A, the auditor's not here, not a day to have the auditor here directly. The issue is the auditor might not agree with us. Now, they could do a couple of things. They could say, reader, these guys are making an assumption which is highly uncertain, you better be aware of that. Or they could take from you, actually, you cannot validly make that assumption, and I'll qualify you. Now that's going to play itself out in the next, assuming we keep 147 million, by the way, that might engage us with a discussion with the auditor between now and the 26th of August as to where they fit. I don't think that's the direct issue for us at the moment. The key issue is you've made a deliberative decision at 147 million. These are the implications. What do you politically want to do with that position? And the resolutions in front of you are, we will keep the $147 million. We'll make a highly uncertain assumption we can get the 9.9, and if we don't, we're going to have to reduce levels of service. So it feels like I've probably said it a second time, but actually, is there any questions now on what either Anne or I said? Paul?
So, if going by that assumption, the amount that we rate based on that, if the money doesn't come through and we don't end up doing that part of the program, does that rated money then go into reserves or what?
That's an effect.
It would cushion rates the following year, I presume.
Yeah.
However you wish to deal with
It depends. I mean, it might be you can get an expanded work program litigation, but yes, it would
Be there for that.
I mean, the resolution, and I perhaps hesitate to use the word, but I will. A reserves probably going to put it will be ring fence for the benefit of the rating rate partner.
Yeah. Okay.
Don.
The highly I can't remember your word. It's an assumption that's carries a lot of risk around it.
Yes.
So we're going to rate the ratepayers, assuming this highly unlikely assumption is going to.
I said highly uncertain, not unlikely.
Highly uncertain.
Better be
Highly
careful.
uncertain.
Better be careful on that one, Don.
Is there another way of doing that? If we didn't rate based on that highly uncertain assumption, and the funds actually did come from the government, could we not borrow short term and then catch up during that next annual plan? That would be another way of doing it.
It's a possibility.
Yeah, I
Which also comes with risk.
You're also implicitly agreeing that you'll reduce the levels of service. Not implicitly, you are explicitly agreeing that you'll reduce the levels of service in the way that writing columns.
Well, personally, I'm a wee bit uncomfortable with rating in addition, additional amounts on the ratepayer based on a highly uncertain outcome. And I didn't actually hear during that submission process, retain levels of service and road. I did hear you need to actually cut back some spending.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, thanks. At risk of making more of a statement than a question, but I think to me it's a messaging piece as well. And if we're going to accept a lower level of service based on uncertainty from NZTA, which we've been actually as a sector complaining about for many years that the two things don't line up, but we're actually sending a message out that we're comfortable with that. And we had the messaging from our audience along the lines of the $174 million program actually being a preferred option in the LTP consultation piece. So we're actually already reducing the level of service against what a lot of our audience were saying. And to then go and reduce that even further because of an uncertainty around the funding, I think that also sends a message to NZTA that we can actually accept that. And I worry about the implications if we do go lower, what that actually does to the roading program going forwards, because that's literally kicking the can down the road. And I hate that expression, but that's what it is. And that will have implications on our roading network. So I think in terms of getting a qualified audit, that actually sends a bit of a message as well that to our audience of NZTA and our ratepayers that we're standing by the need for this piece of our roading fund. I think that's an important part to this process.
Thank you. Yeah, apparently. Your name's been written down. You okay? If you don't want to, I'll go to Jess.
I do have a question. Well, there's more clarity. So there was a mention of last time there was NZTA funding that became available, but we weren't in a position to be able to take it because we hadn't rated the local funded portion. Could that, in that example or in future, I guess if this is ring fenced, if we do rate this and ring fence it, and it turns into reserves, is that always an option of you can take reserves to be the local funding to match the NZTA? So that previously could have been an option of dipping into reserves to get that NZTA funding from.
We didn't have any roading reserves.
Oh, it has to be within roading reserve.
Well, to be fair, it used to be equitable, it should
That's
be
where
out of a roading reserve. Yeah.
So theoretically then, if this is rated and it's ring fenced for roading, and we don't get the
9.9, about the 55%.
it gives us a better position to match what may come up in the future as well, versus potentially borrowing money. Thanks.
Yes, Brett.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. And I agree with the Mayor there that the messaging is important, that once we start putting that message out, what NZTA comes up with, and have we permanently lowered our expectations that we can just keep kicking the can down the road and that the province, that's all we deserve or that's all we'll make do with. A couple of observations here. One, if I may ask, do we have any indication of what sort of money are we applying through with the regional infrastructure fund here? Any ballpark figure?
So we've got this 15 million has gone in, and that's potentially includes some bridges, 2 bridges for another council as well. There's 22 bridges being sought.
I'm just concerned that perhaps maybe I've read wrong, because it said that that is not for business as usual. That you are supposed to, the initial news piece when it came out with that, it said that it has to be for something new in terms of infrastructure, not for.
You also remember that there was the bid, you'll also remember that there was the, I call it an electric promise on 100 million over 10 years. That was also for Southland, Otago area. So I guess that's where we're coming from for that component. So hopefully that will come off. There has been some positive conversations going on in that space. So yeah, potentially there is that opportunity. And I wouldn't mind just taking the opportunity just to highlight that the 174 million, the reduction that, the option that we have got in the long-term plan is that 147. That is already a reduction on the levels of service we've currently been providing. It is 13 kilometres less pavement rehabs and 105 kilometres less resurfacing over that 3-year period. The other thing that is probably worth noting is I've had conversations, or with NZTA and talked with Gordon McDonald, who's the Principal Investment Advisor from Otago Southland, and he was very keen for, in the conversation, he was like, I would really advise you to try and hold on to your local share, because obviously year 2 and 3, there are those opportunities that often come available to take up that additional funding. He then also put me on to James Cargill, who I spoke with. He's the Director of Regional Relationships for West Coast Canterbury, Otago and Southland. And once again, he was suggesting, you know, if you can hold on to that local share when the opportunity arises, typically in year 2 and 3, although we did get an opportunity in year 1 in the last round, I believe, partly.
Yeah, that was that. I suppose, as mentioned, the indicative funding allocation versus the final funding allocation, that bump up in funding.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, to the tune of 6.9 million. I recall that was the issue in 21.
And so the current, the option that we, you know, the council has sort of put forward in the long-term plan at the moment is definitely kicking the can down the road. Hopefully not to the extent that NZTA are going to fund at the 125, but it still is still kicking the can down the road a little bit. So just wanted to make sure that's sure.
Thank you, Fran. And just one more thing here. I'm looking at the walking and cycling but in the budget, which is 3.6 million, and indicative funding is 0.7 million. The whole there is 2.8 million. So if we are getting less than 20% of what we are planning for, should we be rationalizing that amount then, bringing the works program down? Because that's, for me, looks really big. We barely have anything there to start with.
Yeah, I suppose the challenging, but you're right from that point of view. The challenging bit, I suppose, for us is we've got that information just before the agenda went out, and though it's not so much the cycling aspect, it's more around the footpaths, and they're locally funded activities.
Yep.
So that information hasn't actually been discussed with the board. So the option is there still potentially for boards if they'd like to do unsubsidised maintenance.
Through their reserves or something, but...
Yeah. That's what happened previous LTP, that we also had a reduction in funding, and we went back to all the boards and provided them with some options around that. But since we only had the information a week, not even a week, we obviously haven't worked through that process yet.
Yeah, that will have to be taken up with the boards, because that's a big hole there.
Yeah. So that's the way we'd generally go through that process. Go back to the boards, advise them of what it looks like, and get some direction.
Thank you, Adam.
I was going to say, I guess in context and half a minute, the numbers I am. The number we got from NZTA is about 100,000 more than what we made the request for maintenance. So it looks like they've possibly funded most of our maintenance, but it doesn't look like we've got most of the renewal program.
And is this on the lines of what we got the last time, previous LTP? Has been a dramatic drop.
So last time again, so NZTA never used to fund footpaths until about 2018. I think they started funding maintenance in 2018. Last time they did again fund the bulk of our maintenance program, but had a heavy reduction on the renewal program, which was where the Hartley's team needed to go out and talk to the community boards again about what they actually wanted to deliver.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We've made a couple of statements, it's fine, but we've also really about clarification.
So just to, through you, Mr. Chair, just to wrap it up for clarity from a ratepayer perspective. Basically, if we don't get the funding that we may or may not get projected to get, we'll have to go back to our ratepayers in our community and say, look, we didn't get the money that we thought we would, potentially, therefore we're going to have to go back and reduce our levels of service, specifically in this case, roading as opposed to bridging, which will then be some hard questions around whether or not we potentially have to close bridges or look at alternatives from a ratepayer perspective. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I need to look down the road at the... There's a pun. I need to look down the line here at Hartley.
From a, to be fair, from a bridging point of view, while we didn't get 100% of what we were requesting, we got, I think we asked for just over 16 and we got 15 million, so it is very close I'd say, to what we requested, and over a 3-year period, they would largely be able to deliver on the bridges that we wanted to, keeping in mind the additional funding we're also seeking around that infrastructure. So I'd say for the bridges, it doesn't rule it out, anything can happen, but we'd largely still be able to deliver on a bond.
Relatively positive at this stage.
Yeah,
To be able to deliver what we projected to be able to do.
It's just the differential between what we applied for and what we got, particularly for bridging compared to the rest of the program, I'd say is reasonably positive.
Just remembering that there is a significant number of bridges, 122 bridges that need to be replaced by 2024. So, and that continues on. It doesn't stop in 10 years. It continues on. So, just to give you an idea, any bridges that we don't get, it is pushing a bow wave, obviously, as well.
Thank you. Darren, I think you might have perhaps final comment.
So we've got an uncertainty, but history suggests there's less uncertainty because of past experience. Does that get reflected in our document? Our assumption is based on the past. So how do we kind of include that historical context?
Could I ask Darren that we leave that for Andy just to work through how our responsibility where we make assumptions is quite significant. We are saying there should be, and there already is significant disclosure around what we assume in terms of rating. And it should, to the best that we can, quantify what is the uncertainty that we are dealing with. I think in that we would be doing exactly what you said. What are the factors that support us making this assumption or perhaps mitigate its risk? Last triennium, the final number, which isn't available now, came out better. It may not be the strongest thing to note, but other than that, what else can we do? Otherwise, we're into the position of having to go even further into the song.
Just further to Darren's point, I think, because if I put myself in Waka Kotahi's shoes, we delivered our roading program last year. So if they are have any spare money, that puts us in a good position, like, as far as the confidence level goes, that they know that their money is actually going to get utilised. So I think when we're justifying our assumption to the auditor, it's those sorts of things, and what Darren said as well, that factors into us having some confidence behind what we're actually saying.
So can I say the first obligation, and we're trying to, I think we're committed, if I can say this, we run with this option, and it's what Anne's committed to, is full disclosure about what we are assuming. And the sensitivity, the uncertainty, the risk around that. The second order question, which we have to deal with, is how does the auditor view that? And Anne's just giving us fair warning that the sign from the Auditor General might be that because we haven't stopped at 125 million rather than 147, they take a negative view about that. All I would say at this stage is let's see what happens, and how do we professionally mount an argument that the auditors could perhaps see the world in a different way. I think we've got to make this plan work for us first and foremost. And we want $147 million worth of level service. I think is what I'll be arguing. Derek, you've got a comment.
Yeah, if we accept the 10-year plan, although we're not happy with it, if we accept it and give it to the auditors, on the basis that we can come back and revise each year as it goes, because I think there's an item coming up later in the agenda where we can have a good discussion about how we spend our money. So rather than wasting too much time, let's adopt the plan and then have the conversation later in the meeting about is there an opportunity to reduce costs and do things better.
I generally like the approach you're taking. It might just not be this minute, it might be further on. I think that was the point Nicole was making, was actually this plan, because of its challenges, is going to have to be under continual monitoring, which will include things like, are we being efficient in our spend? So, and I want to have my cake eaten too, Derek, and I agree with you. Right, can we move on to the second issue, please? So that's first issue. Thank you for that. Hopefully we're all clear. That table helps a lot.
So the second issue is in a similar vein, It's an AO generated guidance again, and it's on the inflation rates. So if you remember rightly, we have to, as part of our prospective information, estimate what the cost of inflation or the price level increases are going to be over that 10-year period. And we want to do that on the best available information to us. Now, as a council, we can choose to either commission somebody to undertake some rates for us, or choose some rates, or what we've done in the past is, as a sector, we've looked for Burrell to give us that indication. The Office of the Auditor General continue to remind us, of course, that we still have to make sure that they're applicable for us, but that's what we've chosen to do. So in October, they gave us some rates, and we've applied those. Now, as of
October 23. Date's important.
As of last week, we received notification from Burrell. They've given updated quarterly figures, and those figures are for the 10 years they're looking to increase. So they're effectively saying, hey, the projection of where we believe inflation to be in the coming years is actually higher than what we originally thought it was going to be. And so the Office of the Auditor General, in the same vein as the other one, is saying, actually, Council, you need to come back and revise or look at your figures. My argument tends to be that we did the financial statements back before we went out for consultation. They're taking a bit of a wider view, saying you're still basically preparing your financial statements, therefore you need to consider that now. Now, for context, in terms of what it means, in 25-26, they're looking for around probably about an average of 1.2% higher. The next year is looking around the 1%, down to 0.7, 0.6, 0.5, 0.5, 0.4, 0.4, 0.3. So there is considerable increases over that period of time, which of course if you apply that to the baseline figures that we have in our books would substantially increase our costs. Recognising that not all of that of course is going to be rated, because of course NZTA funding, 55%, those sort of things do impact on it. At this point in time, with a similar vein as what we're talking about with NZTA, our recommendation is to disclose as much information as we can for the public to, as you put it, show that sensitivity of what that means on our book. Because to go back out with that information would be a process. That's where we're going. So there's new resolutions that are potentially coming up on that, and it is just purely because as soon as we were pushing the agenda out, we got this information in. So please, next year, or this time, 30 June.
For clarity, please, Anne, we based all our spend, which of course is inflated over the 10 years. Best estimates say take into account inflation, the time value of money. And we based it on estimates dated October 23. Correct? They've come from Burrell, they're basically they're treated as best estimates. This latest information is dated when?
Potentially, we've got a date, do we, on that? It would have been last week.
So, in a situation where normally we would have adopted our plan by June, because of the challenges of adopting an LTP, information last week has come out.
I was just going to make a comment as well. This information is provided by Bill largely for council's annual planning processes. So, they update these things annually. So their intention would have been to provide that for the sector for annual plans. Sorry to interrupt.
I understand that, but I guess the problem is that so that does mean there is a mountable argument that actually we have undershot our planned expenditure. Okay, and it's cumulative because the rates we should have had, the rates we have used this year, well, actually they're across a range, but in essence, we would have added, what is it, 1.3% you said this year to our total spend.
I think it was 25-26, was it?
25-26. So if we're looking at a year, we would add 1.6% or thereabout 3, whatever the number is, to our spend, which is a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, but preliminary numbers, it's around 1.2 million.
Around $1.2 million. And that would accumulate along with the revised the revised assumption over the next 10 years. And it would be a substantial amount, obviously, in millions of dollars. The point is, it's coming late, so to speak, unfortunately, before we've adopted the LTP. So Anne's suggestion, she's conferred with me as well, so I've got a bit of own up to this, is actually that it means, again, to go back to your point, Nicole, we're reasonably, from an inflation perspective, nothing changes for this current year. This assumption affects the outer years. So again, on the basis that we've discussed right at the start, we've got an annual planning process to go through. We're going to have to keep this under total revision. It may well be we have to change our plans quicker than we anticipated because of the impact of inflation. We all know it's been stubborn to stay higher longer than we wanted it, any of us wanted it to be. So the proposition from Anne, I think it's tied up in the resolution behind, is that actually we retain the current assumption, but we disclose in our analysis of the certainty or uncertainty of our assumptions, quite frankly, late information. And this may give rise to having to revise plans going forward. So that's what staff are proposing in terms of getting us to the 26th of August and getting this plan out of the way. Again, the second order question about the auditor is they may say that actually we're based on numbers. It won't affect this coming year, I think you're saying, Anne and Nicole, but it would affect the out years, starting from year 2 of the current plan. Again, I don't know, in case of negotiation, what they might say or do as far as that's concerned. By the way, as I say, we wouldn't be in this position if we had been able to adopt our plan by 30 June, because the numbers would have come out after we'd adopted. Okay, so it's we're stuck here by, well, we're dealing with a matter that has arisen because of timing. Okay, any other questions on that? Yes, Don.
Will the auditor look at this inflation issue and tie in the cost of debt as well?
Probably not. You mean would they look to revise the debt assumption?
Well, if inflation's up, interest rates are likely to be up as well.
Yeah, well, we need to make certain that we cover off all that, because we should be covering it as well, Don. Great. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So based on those incremental percentage increases of inflationary 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 6 over a 10-year period, is that correspondence with the Auditor General and Burl? Can we get some sort of averages over that period of time to be able to give us a greater level of guidance over what direction we can take in terms of our level of expenditure?
Check here that I've picked up the question right, Tom. We have from Burl, which is taken as best estimates, a revised set of numbers going out, and it's going to increase. And sorry, I think we said for, let's be clear, 24-25 appears to be basically unaffected. We are where we are. We've got best estimates. It's quite natural. 25-26, based on the updated numbers, it could be that we face increased expenditure based on our current plans that are in the LTP of having to fund an additional $1.5 million. So that's really the key point. There's no averaging or something like that. The question is, if we're faced with that level of increased spend, what would we do?
But aren't the increases, didn't you say before, Anne, that they would go up by 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 over that 10-year period? So therefore,
on top of the original 1.3, yes.
On top of that?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Cumulative going through.
Yeah.
I mean, that 1.5 million grows to quite a reasonable number year 10.
Yeah.
Roughly, probably 12 million.
That's $12 million additional spend on top for year 10.
Yes, okay.
And that's rough numbers.
No, it's a significant issue going forward. That's why we need to be very clear and upfront about the basis of our preparation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Right, I think I've made a mess of you.
No, not at all. No, that gives me clarity. That's all.
Okay, is there anything else then that we,
At the risk of slowing things down, and I'll be quick, but just that it's a statement really around this whole LTP, and it ties back to what you said earlier. It's a line in the sand, and the cost of going back and rehashing all of these numbers and potentially needing to reconsult if it makes a material difference, based on a crystal ball assumption from an economist. I mean, if they were right all the time, we'd all be rich. So I think for me, we're locking in the annual plan part of this, which is the important piece. It's not making any material impact on the next year, and anything else can get adapted into the future annual plan. So I think Anne's advice is sound.
Matt?
Will inflation potentially affect our financial investment strategy assumptions as well, as far as potentially positively an offset if interest rates on lending's going to go up, then could potentially our investment strategy slightly be offsetting?
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
there's
lots of broad assumption if our interest rates are high for debt, that probably be good for our investments as well.
So that's fair to go with this option, knowing that it's going to have to be readdressed every annual planning.
We still have, we're obliged, Rob, to put our best foot forward. Best estimates. So that's why we just need to be clear about what we're doing and not the.
But it could change again in December, and then do we rehash it all?
That's right. We have to continue. I'm conscious that I'm meant to get to the point of adjourning the meeting. I realised that. Sorry, Rachel.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
Right.
You thought I was going to carry on, didn't you? For a council meeting, I sense, given that I presume that's going to be open to the public,
Yes.
I do need to adjourn this conversation. We'll have to pick it up at in the course of the next part of the meeting. So when we come back, I think we've had a good. No more issues.
I've got a couple of things just to.
A couple of other things then, just the process of what we go through to get to the 26th before we address the resolution. So
we have two options. We can adjourn here, open the council meeting, adjourn and carry on, and then go back to council after this discussion finishes with F&A.
Yeah.
You have a
look at your way, mate.
I'm easy.
What would you like to do? I would be quite keen to finish this off, but
You want to finish
if I can, otherwise. I don't know if I'm on a roll, but I think we're at a similar point. So perhaps if at this stage, what I should do is adjourn the meeting to invite you to open and adjourn the council meeting, please.
So I will declare the council meeting on the 7th of July. It is August. Open and welcome everybody here, and I will move that we adjourn the meeting to carry on with F&A. Do I have a second for that? Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? That is carried. And I'll adjourn the meeting and hand back to Bruce.
Thanks, Rob. So we'll reconvene for a short session here. And there were two, so we had a good crack at the two big issues, but there are some other matters you need to raise with us, please.
Yes, so there's just two other resolutions potentially in there that we haven't talked about, and I'll turn quickly over to Teresa just in terms of the impact on the financials. But those last couple of points, one was just the acknowledgement of the submissions from the Waikato Trails Trust and the Fiordlands Trails Trust. So apologies from us is that they actually, I'm just not sure, but we'll find out why, but they didn't get included in the other issues paper. So you didn't actually have any direction in terms of those from us when you were considering that as part of deliberations. So what we have done is just recommend the resolution up here, given the quantum of amount that's concerned, and given that it was part of the submissions and therefore the rate to talk about it, what we're just recommending, I don't know if it's...
Which one is it, do you know?
You look at L, it's the new L.
Yeah, that we just acknowledge the submission from the two trusts and any requests, and ask staff to forward their request to the relevant community boards for consideration and recommendation to council with any requests incorporated into the 25-26 annual plan consultation process, because we haven't had the views of those communities come back to us, and then their views can then come back to council, and we can incorporate that into the next annual plan if that's what you'd like to see happen.
Just the other one that was missed there too was the Te Hikoi Museum one as well.
Okay.
But I just wonder, in terms of the Waikai Trails Trust, with their request around the forestry asset, which is the community board controlled, whether that needs to actually have a wider, that's more of a wider council discussion around that. So I think just making sure that we're not.
I guess there's potentially two issues, isn't there? One is their request for funding, and then there's the suggestion of where the funding can come from.
Yeah, just Councillor Wilson and I spoke at their AGM a couple of days ago, so.
Would you like an amendment? Would you like us to include Te Hikoi?
I think we should include Te Hikoi in there. And also, there was the other, Tuatapere Museum that requested as well. I don't think what they were called, sorry.
The archives.
Archives, that's it.
And Tuatapere Archives, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Contestable grants.
And there was a second issue,
And
second matter.
well, and the second matter that I just wanted to raise was, we didn't actually have a meeting of finance and assurance before council, because usually what would happen is you'd have a finance and assurance meeting on the 26th of August, just to acknowledge or to receive the final LTP report, to consider it and then endorse it for recommendation for adoption by council. So we're just suggesting that that meeting occur placed on the agenda.
One of those classic ones of the hour before you meet off, we better do our piece of the Finance and Administration Committee and nail the final version.
So I'll just hand quickly now, I'm going to basically outline just what the implications were of the deliberations on the financials.
Question in relation to the Waikai Trails Trust, and understand that's going back to the community board. Because it has impact on other community boards, should we be forwarding that to other community boards? The forestry, for example, which has been used to reduce rates for all ratepayers. And the Waikai Trails Trust is suggesting that the forestry asset be used to support the supplementary.
So I need to go back and just review it, but my recommendation would be, as in regards to the funding request, to go back to the community board. And that funding request also mentioned that they are looking for council to fund it from the forestry reserve, and then see if the community board will endorse that or is committed to it, and then they put it back to yourselves. And then you consider that as part of that issue then. And then you would incorporate it. At that stage you would decide whether or not that you wanted to incorporate it in your annual plan, and you would note in there that very fact.
So in short, Christine, these just been deferred to next year's annual plan, is what it really comes down to, because when there was a different approach to the actual funding of it. You're right, other community boards might have to say that, but that could be in the 25, 26 annual plan.
That would be fine, thank you, because I appreciate that it hasn't been discussed in deliberations and it needs to be heard. And this is
I think it's important though that we acknowledge that actually this has to be dealt with. We don't lose sight.
Paul, just with the Central Western Archives people, I thought they were asking for consideration for operational funding through the District Heritage Fund rate. Am I wrong about that? I didn't think they were asking for money from the community board.
They were asking those, I think, through you, Mr. Chair, to be made contestable.
Look, I'm sorry, just Brad.
They wanted those funds to be made contestable. That was their main concern.
Yeah.
They were just expecting that it's going to come to them, and it wasn't earmarked.
Yeah.
I think it was just in terms of, sorry, through the chair, I think it was just in terms of them being missed and the additional pieces to is that correct? In terms of just capturing them?
Yeah, it's just a capture.
As one of the allottees.
So I understand from previous comments that comes from staff that it's already been made contestable.
So I'm not sure where that takes us.
Sorry, through you. I believe it's contestable. Paul, we were on the committee for the district heritage committee.
Yeah, well,
right?
I'm not involved in that funding, but I think it is a bit of an issue that there's no criteria set up for that money. And as they're a new entity, in the past, it's taken organisations 2 or 3 years to sort of get distributed money from it. So it's an internal council process that needs to be looked at, I think.
Right. I think Anne might be just looking at some suggestion from wording. I just wondered, Teresa, we'd have a look at financial implications of the decisions of
It's a finite amount of money, I think $60,000. And so the more entities get funding from it, it makes the pie a bit smaller for everyone else. Not that I'm saying that's a reason not to do it, but I'm just saying that's the reality of it.
Thank you, Paul. Teresa.
Good morning. The rate changes at the deliberations meeting on the 25th of July have been implemented, which decrease the rates in year one by 305k from 72.4 million to 72.1 million. The original rate increase was going to be 13.66%, and after the changes, the rate increase in year one is 13.18%. Council meets all of its benchmarks except for the balanced budget benchmark, and Council is not operating a balanced budget in 7 of the 10 years, and that's been previously discussed in previous meetings. And there's a separate resolution regarding that in the meeting and the report today. The areas contributing to the unbalanced budget is that we're not fully funding depreciation. And also the net debt moved from 260 mil to 249 mil with the changes that were implemented. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you. Appreciate that. In the paper, thank you for that. In the paper reflects that in terms of the table that we have introduced in our agenda papers. So we're just moving on to it here, but we also have to recognise, and it's important to assert, that we are comfortable with the financial implications of this plan. I just want to remind us, for the first 7 years, if my memory has it right, we are not setting a balanced budget. Our expenditure exceeds our revenue, even with the proposed rate increase. So we have to conclude the statutory section 100 of the Act that is prudent to do so. Now, we've discussed that at some length at our prior F&A, and I suspect you probably already talked about this at your council meeting as well, but it's important that we reset that. Anne, how are we going on this resolution? I wonder if I could just work slowly, but deliberative. Sorry. Thank you for that, Teresa. I haven't opened it up for questions. If folk have points they'd like to make at this stage. Sorry, there's the point about what we're adding here and about the budget. Again, this probably reflects the fact that we've been through this and substantively probably a number of times over the last 18 months. Rob.
And you might not be able to answer the question, but in terms of that 13.1 average increase now, were there any massive deviations from any of the outside of the average increase that needs to kind of be reflected in it in any of the different sectors or anything, or was it all kind of in line with that average change?
Between each of the different types of rates, do you mean? No, I've actually got that here. But there wasn't any huge differences in the different categories of the rates. So,
in terms of the way that it impacts, the changes that we made to the roading rate, the biggest reduction is in that forestry area. So those properties here don't have the same level of increase that they were as per the draft plan.
And we saw that in the deliberation piece. So yeah, thank you.
There's also a few changes to the projects that were made for 23-24. That's deferred some debt repayments, which has reduced some of the water and sewage rates, I think, slightly as well, which will affect households.
Right, if I could just walk us slowly through the resolutions. We're obviously going to receive the report and perhaps just to acknowledge, I would have to write it down, the updated verbal, that it reflects the current information we're getting. B, C and C reflects we are meeting our requirements under the Act. D is that we endorse the draft unaudited LTP as attached, including any amendments agreed. I'm conscious, Julie, that you, for instance, and I think there may be a couple of other councillors have also sent by way of email a bunch of really good information. My read is not to dismiss it, but actually to ask management and actually Rob, you as well, consider how that is incorporated. It's about tone and nature of it, and I think they're good suggestions. So I want to acknowledge that. So here goes D is substantive that we endorse it, but secondly, the big part is that we endorse the retention of the roading program at $147 million. I won't re-explain it, I think we've gone through it, but we are going to resolve that. Well, I'm assuming that's what we are going to resolve. We agree that we put in the 125 million and in effect 55% share that NZTA have indicated through their 2 letters to date. Okay, and to be clear, that's what the numbers are that are actually inside the LTP. G is that we assume the difference between their indicative funding in those 2 letters and what we would want with a $147 million program can be gained by some other means. Christine, whatever we choose to do, Rob, you'll find a way to do it, I'm sure, confident, that we can find the balance. And it actually, I've noticed this, it comes to $10.196 million. And we are going to assume it, and we talked about the assumption of that, and we won't show it as NZTA funding, we will show it as in the LTP as grants, central government. We note the uncertainty, this is H, we note the uncertainty of that resolution, and we acknowledge that if we don't get it, and it will be part of, I'm sure, future planning, we will have to reduce levels of service. Bear in mind, and we've also spent a fair bit of time discussing what we will rate as if we've got $147 million. So any overhang in the rates, we will ring fence and put that rate. We acknowledge the late indicators of inflation may stay higher than forecast at the time of finalisation of this plan. So this is the late running information that's come in that suggests that actually we may face a bigger hurdle in 25, 26 onwards. J is that we agree that this increases the uncertainty, which will require additional information to be added to the assumption. So we aren't going to change the current LTP for this item, but we are going to note the heightened nature of uncertainty in the LTP. Those were the 2 substantive matters that we discussed, and I reflect we've still got a second order question on those with our audit. K is an important part that we agree to continue to advocate and seek opportunities with NZTA and central government. So we cannot be, we need to be proactive, not reactive in terms of that, what effectively is a hole in our budget at the moment. Now, Al, can you just tell me what you've got there, please, Anne?
Yeah, so I just changed it, sorry. Acknowledge the submissions of Waikato Trails Trust, Fiordland Trails Trust, Te Huka Museum and Central and Western Archive, Morihaku Southland, and their funding requests, and ask staff to forward their request, if applicable, to the relevant community boards for consideration, with any recommendations incorporated into the 25-26 annual plan consultation process, clarifying any information to submit as required.
About the capital I on incorporated.
Okay.
Might be just the I with the dot.
Yeah, I think it's the I's are really bad. You don't need to be lowercase.
Are we? Are you comfortable with that, folk?
Yeah.
Your way, because
Hugely pedantic, but I think it's just Central Western Archive, not Central and Western.
Oh, I Googled.
Did you?
I did.
You don't mess with Mr Google.
Sorry, just remember we're trying to get the resolution finalised. So, Margie, you've got a
I
comment
just
on
want
that?
to go back to H, and we're talking about continue to advocate and seek opportunities with NZTA and local government. We talked a lot through submissions and deliberations about efficiencies with their contractors. Can something be put in there around that as well, looking for the opportunities to have efficiencies, or am I totally off the page here?
I think what I don't have any trouble with that, and I think and Derek has raised the issue as well. I personally, this is a statement from me as an individual, not trying to put a committee view, that actually we know we're going to have to monitor all aspects of actually our financial strategy, and there should actually be a role of this committee, by the way, going forward. It's going to be efficiency of spend. It's going to be, are we a smart purchaser through exactly your point, our roading alliance program? Are we running other things that are there? That's not incorporated in here. This one particularly deals with protecting levels of service. I think we're stating a point here that is important in generality rather than it being specific, Margie. It's a long way of saying I don't know we need to put that in there. Not that I would want to lose that, or indeed, for instance, if it this forms true that we've got $1.5 million to find next year, we're going to have to look at
Thanks, Fish. We finish.
No, you're right. Go.
Just while we're on H, because I just had a suggestion on there as well, and I just wonder whether it's worth noting that we're going against the deliberation outcome from what the ratepayers are requesting. If we go down that line,
I think you probably incorporate that as part of your deliberations.
yeah, so that's accounted for. They need to acknowledge it in this piece as well.
You did that under deliberations.
Margie, sorry.
No, I'm.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm just looking at that balance of
Good idea, though. I think it's a really important point. We'll come back to one of those issues later on in this meeting. So, Al, I think we've got Al right now, including the spelling, which is interesting. So with this, we propose to release this formally, although I think it's fair to say, and our auditor already has this in his hands, that we approve the release of this to the audit, for audit, incorporating the agreed minutes of this meeting. I want to just reflect that will pick up things such as some very helpful tonal messages that we've been given. Teresa's raised the important point that we again at this point assert that that in accordance with section 100, this is a financially prudent plan, even though we are projecting deficits in the first 7 of 10 years. I've asked for a general delegation of authority to myself and to Cameron to finalise any amendments subsequent to this meeting, and that's, I want to reflect, there is still clearly some substantial work that needs to be done to finalise that's in front of us, even though we endorse it. I'm also wanting to be quite specific. I suspect there is a bit of discussion with our auditor. As chair, I think it's appropriate this committee runs the relationship with the auditor, and I think it makes sense that on the surface, we may have to be prepared to countenance resolution. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, where it says to finalise any amendments, should we be more specific? Any amendments to the LTP?
Yep.
Because otherwise, any amendments could be very far-reaching.
Sorry, and I was wanting to avoid what originally was just minor amendments, and I think, quite frankly, we're
I don't.
so look. Why don't we say? I like your point, but amendments to the LTP, and or impacts on the audit opinion. Okay, I'm just looking to have the brief that before we come back on the 26th.
The audit opinion at last.
Already got that.
Have I?
It's not in Bruce's comment.
Oh, have you already got that in there? Okay.
Then it's to the LTP.
Sorry, I can turn around, shouldn't I? Sorry about that. Sarah?
Finalise any amendments to the LTP, subject to this
meeting, yeah.
including matters impacted by.
Yeah. Okay. That essentially just gives us a chance to have a process in place at high level, which means that we can land on the 26th with reasonable knowledge. And we agree to a finance and assurance meeting on the 26th, which will be in front of your council meeting where we propose to adopt it. That's logical, given the terms of reference of this committee, to have a chance, I suspect, for you to hear from me and Cameron, or the nominees, about actually what over the next 10 days.
We're just going to change the.
Okay, yeah, great. So we're just moving one down. We endorse the draft unaudited annual plan is attached to the bottom of the list. Do I have somebody prepared to move? Thank you, Julie. Seconder. Thank you, Christine. I should allow, I know we're pressed for time, but a debate on the motion. Anybody want to make any final comments before I put the motion? There being none, I'll put the motion then, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
Aye.
Right, we've recorded on its name, please. Thank you. That's useful. Appreciate that. That's step along the way. 8-month journey. 2 weeks to go. I think something like that. Can I thank you for your engagement, Anne. Well done, Nicole. It's been an anticipated, difficult meeting, and it's not a problem of Southland District. It's actually a position we find. So thank you for that. And at this stage, I'll return the meeting to our council to that place. I'll take the chair role. If you want to. Watch my emails.
Do we have a couple of minutes just to stretch our legs while we rearrange the table as well? So we'll come back to it, but just a couple of minutes.
Nothing more.